Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Sex Ed in the City with Drew and Dr. G, episode 4. We're very excited you're with us today. We have a good session planned. Dr. G, how's it
Can't believe we're
going?
here on session 4. I'm so excited. I've also been super excited about all the feedback and people that have reached out like, oh my God, I listened. It was so great. Or just I don't know, it feels nice to have folks that, we know and love listening in and then being so excited about it as well. So I'm excited that we're continuing on this journey.
It feels great. I think optimistically, I was thinking okay, we'll do it and eventually people will catch on. But the fact that people started already, like Joe and Saxon always message me, shout out to Joe and Saxon when as soon as it comes out, my dad, your mom has messaged. We had a stranger message us, so exciting.
Yeah, my mom is watching it on our YouTube channel
Mm.
because she's not really, she doesn't really do podcast type things. I felt so bad. I was like, well, do you know what a podcast is? She was like, I'm not an idiot, Rachel. Of course I know what a podcast is. But then she was like, but how do I listen to it? She had no idea but I love it. So she's watching it on our YouTube channel, which is great because, then she gets to see our personalities and stuff. So,
The
and
story. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, she can't wait to be on it. So I'm super excited for that day.
I am still sitting with the story from episode 2 where you talk about hip or shoulder checking her. I was talking about that with my folks and we were just cracking up.
Well, she didn't remember that. She told me, she's like, I don't remember that happening. I'm like, well, good, because I almost died. So that was funny. But yeah. But isn't that interesting though? That moments in our lives that seem so big to us, other people won't even remember. Kind of brings into perspective for me anyway. When we were talking about last episode about shame and when we have shame and that we let it fester so much in us and work it into this big thing that it's really good to let it go and because the other people might not even know or remember or even notice the things that we feel embarrassed or shameful about.
We are our own biggest critic. We go in a place and we're so insecure, but that's us. We are criticizing ourselves. Half these other people don't even know or aren't even. These people aren't even looking at us.
Everyone's too busy judging themselves.
Yes.
We're all in a room judging ourselves, worried that someone's going to judge us, but everyone is judging them. It's we need to get it together.
We need to get off our own egos. Yeah.
And when I say we, I mean the collective we as society. Why are we all afraid of judging? What's going on? But well, let's talk about shaming people. We won't say names. However, I want to open up today with talking about, well, we're going to talk today about what are the great qualities of teachers and what does a great teacher really need to have. But I want to open it up with who was your worst teacher ever and why? And we should probably not say their names because I'm not into shaming, but I do think it's important to talk about because I think everyone has at least one teacher there. That person is deeply unpleasant.
Say their names, Dr. Gibson. We give no fucks.
Okay, so you go first. Who is your worst teacher ever and why?
The worst teacher ever is me right now at the end of the school year.
Lies. That's every teacher, especially in New York. God. Everyone's like, can finals and regions just be over? Why?
I'm so exhausted. I have so little joy right now. But I was thinking that today. I was just I feel like I'm the worst teacher. But I thought of 2 teachers that were my least favorite. One was in 4th grade and one was my freshman year of college. I think he was my first class. And I was trying to think what I didn't like about them. And they were both very similar. Not to shout out identities, but they were both old or older white men. They were really dry and boring. They were by the book. There was no creativity. There was no humor. It was just kind of I picture it class from the early 1900s. Come in, do your book work. Yeah, I didn't have fun. I didn't like it. I didn't learn. One was a lecture and one was just like a 4th grade math class. So, but similar vibes, similar feelings.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Remember bookwork, remember textbooks, read chapter 3, answer questions X, Y, and Z. I would spend hours for social studies. I remember doing that.
Yes.
The long questions. Can I tell you anything about history? No. Listen, those textbooks and reading and answering the questions do not work. If anyone's still doing that, please stop now.
Annotating, like and the cool thing about health is we don't have to use textbooks, or we shouldn't really be, because everything's changing all the time. So it's like, find an article online, do something.
When I find out, when people are like, oh, let's use, what textbook do you use? I'm like, I haven't used a textbook since 2004. So no. Oh my gosh. So my worst teachers, I also had 2. They, interestingly enough, had the same name. Isn't that weird? But mine were for very different reasons. It wasn't they were boring, they were mean. So, and they both involved them shaming me and embarrassing me. So the first one was my 1st grade teacher. I'm 6. This chick made me pee my pants, not once, but twice, because she wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. And like, who? First of all young people should be allowed to go to the bathroom whenever they need to go to the bathroom, period. We should be in charge of our bodies, but especially a 6-year-old that, you're still kind of learning how to control the pee. And twice, once it was like by the end of the day and the bell was about to ring and I had to go, she wouldn't let me. So by the time the bell rang, I had to run and I literally remember I couldn't get my pants down fast enough and I peed my pants. And then another time was on a recess. She wouldn't let me come in to use the bathroom. And I remember going to sit on a bench and just sitting there and peeing because I had to go so bad. And then I told everyone I fell in a puddle. I thought I was going to be kidding. It was like sunny and, pee smells. But she was so mean. So she made me pee my pants twice. And then I remember I stole flashcards from her to practice my math.
And I never gave them back.
No, my mom found out that I stole them and it was humiliating because my mom made me give them back and apologize to her. And I had a bit of a stealing problem when I was young. Like I'd steal things from like candy from the store. So my mom would always, my mom found out, she would make me go back and like apologize to the people. But I remember being so upset. So yeah, and that 1st grade teacher made me pee my pants twice. So rude. And then the other one was in 10th grade, my chemistry teacher. So a bit about me, I really struggle with math. Just doesn't come easy. Like probably because my 1st grade teacher, I was trying to practice my math and she was being mean. So I blame it all on her. But
Drama.
Yeah. So I remember in 10th grade chemistry. So I was like advanced. Most people didn't take chemistry until they were juniors. I took it in 10th grade because I was like ahead, blah, blah, blah. But I was the only sophomore in the class. And so we did something and we had to make a graph. And I made the wrong kind of graph. It was supposed to be a bar graph. I made a line graph or something. I don't know. I did the wrong graph. But she embarrassed me in front of the whole class. She was like, that's so stupid. Why would you do that kind of graph? That's doesn't even make sense. She like embarrassed me. I was like crying in class because I was so embarrassed. And then to make it even worse, I was telling a friend about it later the day. And she was like, oh, that was you? She told everyone in our class about that too. Imagine the shame. Like, and I was a really good student, right? Like I worked really hard in school, like very like into school. And I was trying. It's not like I was like fucking around and did something. Not that would make it okay for her to shame me, but I'm just like, who does that? Like,
so many thoughts and feelings about that. Like all of that. Like, and that will segue nicely into like what we're going to talk about. But like, yeah, like kids in the bathroom, like, I hope that teacher learned their lesson, like 6th grade, what? Let them go.
6.
Oh yeah, 6, not even 6th grade.
Yeah, I was 6 years old. First grade. I'm in first grade. I'm like a baby. Talking about you can't go to the bathroom.
I'd be like
Get out of here.
revenge pissing all over that room all the time.
Can you imagine? Like, and no bodily autonomy. I mean, that's one thing I like about Bard. And I remember when I was teaching there that because I worked at other schools where they make this big deal about the kids couldn't go to the bathroom the first or the last 10 minutes of the period. And
Yeah.
they had to have a pass. And it was like so dramatic. I'm like, they're just gonna pee. And if we're trying to like control them because they're doing something else besides peeing, they're going to find a way to do whatever they want to do anyway. And you want me to waste all this time? We had to make
Correct.
a log book.
Sign something.
Who's when you're going pee? I'm like, can people just go pee? Like, and if they're going to do something else, they're going to do it regardless. So
yes, precisely.
You're just making like a mountain out of a mole or something, whatever that phrase is. I'm like, ugh. Like, so I think when I started teaching at Bard and that was like a rule that young people could go to the bathroom when they needed, I was like, thank goodness, because I was just like, go to the bathroom. You do not have to ask me. Like, try not to like disrupt the whole class on your way out. But like, I don't need to give a 17-year-old permission to pee.
It feels like very policey, right? You draw the comparisons between like school and like prisons and stuff. And that's one way where it's just like a very control oriented.
Yes.
I will say like, there'll be times a kid has to go and I'm like, can you hold it for like 5 minutes just so like I'm done explaining or something? But like, if it's an emergency, like like go do what you got to do. If you're going to go vape, whatever, I don't know what you're doing, but just get out of here.
Well, like, and for me, it's more about teaching them about how and when there's a natural break in a setting to go do what you need, right? Because like, you know, I worked at schools, I'm in the middle of like talking and a kid's doing the pencil sharpener and I'm like, it's like, I'm like, okay, can you wait like 0.2 seconds, right? So for me, it was about teaching young people that, because my school is about learning, like, it's about socialization. Like, so when is there a pause that this is a great time for me to get up and go take care of whatever I need to get up with, you know? So once I was at Bard, I was like, please don't ask me to use the bathroom. Just don't disrupt the class and just go when you need to go. And teachers would be like, well, they go in my class every day. I'm like, maybe that's when they have to pee every day. Like, I pee at very similar times as well.
Yeah.
Or I would always get yelled at by the deans in my other school. Miss Gibson, you let so-and-so to the bathroom. I'm like, ugh. And then like teachers would like shame them with these like passes that I'm like, can we just stop and let everyone pee?
Just let them go. Like if they're gone for like 20 to 30 minutes, then I'm like, okay, like let's have a conversation. But 99% of kids just need to go and come back. That's all they want to do.
Yeah.
Or they need a break.
And again, if they're doing something else, they're going to do it anyway. Like, I'm like so over ever telling a person when they can go pee or not.
I leave in the middle of class sometimes too to go to the bathroom. I'm like, okay, they're working. Like the bathroom's right next door. I can just bop in and I come back. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? They're fucked.
Well, isn't that wild too? People don't realize that teachers, you don't get to use the bathroom. Right. And, you know, at some schools, you're like not allowed to leave students alone, but like you literally have like sometimes like, no, I must go. And I would be like, and where I taught at one school where I was the only classroom on that floor because it was on the 10th floor. And I'd be like, okay, y'all, I'm going pee. It's right there. I've always put someone in charge, some like random kid, and be like, you know, you're in charge. Don't get crazy. I'll be back. I'd be like peeing as fast as possible. And then I would always, there was like this corner. I would always stop at the corner and listen to see what they were talking about or what they were doing without me in the room. And I got some hilarious conversations, but nothing ever happened. But it was just, people don't realize when you're teaching, like you don't even have your own bodily autonomy to go to the bathroom. when you want.
Yeah, you have unless you have a
Wild.
student teacher or something, but like, yeah, and I think I feel safe leaving my kids, but like I wouldn't have done that at every school I've taught at. They would have
Yeah.
ripped the place down.
Yeah. But then how wild is that as high school teachers that we can't leave a classroom for a few minutes
Yep.
without like all hell breaking loose? So what does that say about the
Yeah.
system? You know, like I refuse to believe that it's all Lord of the Flies. You know what I mean? What does that say about this system we've created
Yeah.
where if an adult walks out of the room, it's like Armageddon?
Yeah,
Like,
they do want a little freedom, and of course
yeah,
they'll push it as much as they can.
yeah,
But,
that's wild.
let's talk about what we're talking about today.
Yeah. So what are like some of the most important characteristics of a teacher?
Yeah, I listed a bunch here. I was trying to think of just teaching in general. I didn't know if you looked at it through the lens of like sex ed. But I just thought like what makes a good teacher. I felt like we could just like talk back and forth a little bit. The first one I had was a general caring and enjoyment of young people. I felt like
Right?
yeah, I feel like that should be the baseline. If you don't like working with young people or your age group, maybe find a different pathway or a different
Yeah.
age to work with. Maybe go to college or something that's less
Yeah.
nurturing. Because I feel like, I mean, we've talked about this, like so many people are in it now, but you get the vibe that they're not like on the side of the kids, or they don't enjoy working with them, or they're not willing to go above and beyond for them. And it kind of feels like, oh, a little hard to watch.
Yeah, it seems like something happens with people as they go through their career. At some point they become jaded, and I don't think that's the young people's fault. I think that's the system's fault. But yeah, you have to like young people. Like there's a reason I was in elementary school, because me and little kids, it's not really a vibe. I'm like 16 and 17, 15, that's like my sweet spot for sure.
You always did high school. You never did a middle school?
No, like I've subbed elementary school. I've done like workshops in middle school, but I was always a high school. I've always taught ninth or 10th.
Yeah.
Which I love. I prefer 10th. 10th grade is my favorite year because the ninth graders are still need a little too many hugs. For my convenience or my preference. But but the 10th graders, they've pretty, they're like past the awkward puberty mostly. But they're still kind of like fun. They're not like seniors where they know everything and are like, oh, you can't tell me what to do. They're not there yet. So I love 10th graders. That is my jam. Like 15, 16. Yeah. It's a fun grade.
That's a big develop. It doesn't seem like it, but 9th to 10th, even though it's 1 year, is huge.
Yo, they come back that summer.
Different like, children.
10 inches taller. The boys all have a deep voice. The girls have curves. You're like, what just happened?
It is
like the boys that, because boys typically develop a little bit later, right? So the boys that were like tiny in 9th grade, like grow so much, and they come back 10th grade like, I miss. So cute.
Oh
yeah, but you have to like young people. Well, let me read what my nephew said. So for context, everyone, my nephew is 10. He's going to 4th grade. And so I was like, can you tell me like about your favorite teacher and what you liked about them? So he said, the most important qualities of a teacher, the first thing he said was that they are nice. And then he said, the second thing he said, they know how to teach and they explain everything really good. And they make sure you don't forget the things they're teaching you, which I thought was so cute. And I was like, well, tell me about your favorite teacher. And he was like, well, she knew lots of math. She was good at reading and knew lots of social studies. But then he said something that I thought was so cute. He was like, she pushed us to our limits. Like we really did challenging math. And I thought it was like, wow, like, I don't know, he's 10. He's like, she pushed us to our limits. And then, but then he was like, but she also did chip challenges. And I'm like, what is that? So she would bring in different flavors of chips and they would have like taste tests. So he's like, she like was rigorous, right? But she was also fun. And that's what I think as a good teacher and a good pedagogy is, right? Like you're rigorous and you're like molding the minds, but you're having fun while you're doing it. Like how many of us remember the tests that we did, but what about the projects that we had so much fun doing? And I really think that's what makes a good teacher, to sitting and lecturing, bleh, but like how are you making what you're teaching fun? And I truly believe that pedagogy is an art. And yes, you can get your degrees and there are things to learn, but I really think good teaching is an art and it is a talent. And
do you want to say what? Go ahead. Do you want to explain what pedagogy is, maybe for some of our listeners?
Oh yeah, for those of folks that aren't teachers, pedagogy is, I don't know the dictionary definition, but it's just like the art and science of teaching and what you do in a classroom. Everything from like how you set up the classroom with your student desks to how you write a lesson plan to how you ask questions, all of those type of things. But I really do think there's a talent in it.
Yeah.
That not everyone possesses. That seems rude, but it's true.
Yeah. It is. It's a skill as well. Like it takes practice. Like nobody's great right off the bat. I put the same thing. For mine, I put high expectations, right? As much as some kids don't want to be in school, they're going to remember how they felt in your class. And if your class can be like easy, quote unquote, that's like fine, but they do want to be challenged in some way. Doesn't have to be, oh, it's the hardest course imaginable. It could just be like, I was challenged to think about the world in a new way. I was challenged to like express myself or to be more social with my classmates. Because if they're just going through the motions and it's easy and they're not really thinking, like, I don't think that's great education. I don't think that's what we're necessarily here to do. And sometimes we like take classes where we chill and stuff, but that can't be the overall vibe.
Well, I think that's the challenge with health education, right? People are like, we need academic rigor, but health education is challenging in a different way, right? It's not physics. It's not OChem. It's challenging young people to look at the world and evaluate their emotions and their lives in a way that and reflect in a way that they're often not allowed to, and all of those things. So, you see sometimes health teachers being evaluated on like Danielson or whatever. And I'm like, okay, yes. But when we're talking about health education as a whole, we're not just talking about the knowledge, right? Those knowledge, the attitudes and the behaviors, right? We're really talking about, we can give anyone a quiz, but we're talking about those attitudes. And when I was at Bard, I think my young people had a hard time because they wanted quizzes and tests. And I was like, no, we're going to talk about feelings. And they were like,
dig it. I know the difference. One of the big things this students in general is like difference between a thought and a feeling. It's like, like that's a thought. That's what you're thinking. That's not what you're actually feeling. That's an important ass skill. It's
even for
crucial.
Adults. People love to say, well, I feel like, and then they tell you a thought and you're like, interesting. No. even with my graduate students,
correct.
My PhD students struggle with getting into the feeling part. I mean, the Widener classes, but but so what a great thing about health education that we're teaching them that skill at such a young age.
There's so many ways to do it. Like you got to talk about how important it is, give them a list of feelings so they can like pick them out, like something besides good, bad, like, fine feelings I'm not expressing. I always use that one. Like,
or I feel some type of way. I don't know if that's like the lingo anymore, but my last few years of teaching, that was the lingo. I feel some type of way. I'm like, great. So let's delve into what type.
It feels almost like therapy-ish, but we are definitely not trained therapists at all.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's part of the fault of the English language, right? We both teach in English. The English language does not have a lot of good words. Like when you if you think about like Spanish, right? It's the only other language I know. There's so many more adjectives in Spanish. So I think also sometimes it can be harder in English to describe how you're actually feeling. I don't think we have I mean, there are millions of words about feelings, but when I think about it, especially for students who are multilingual or bilingual, I wonder if that's ever a hinder to them.
That's a good point. I don't know if I ever really thought about that. I try to keep like a big list and try to use the words like I'm actually meaning, like rather than saying like a very or like so. Find that word that like encompasses that, but it's hard for adults.
Oh, I love a feelings wheel.
Yeah.
I feel like in health class or any type of affective learning class, there has to be a feelings wheel present.
Would love a big one to like hang on the wall or something.
Yes.
That would be beautiful.
I mean, I think we need feelings wheels in our everyday life, just communicating with people.
Get one tattooed right on my arm, Jesus.
Right. I was in dance class the other day and we were learning this move and it was like we kind of rotate partners and I was at the instructor and I looked at her and I was like, I feel very uncomfortable now. And she's like, that is a great adjective. I was like, great. So as you're doing this, just keep that in mind. I was like so stiff because I felt so uncomfortable. But I think I could, in a dance class, I'm not going to like delve into it. But in a health class, it would be interesting to talk more about that.
What other traits came up for you when thinking about quality educators?
Yeah, I really think that, in like professional lingo, it's called differentiated instruction, but I really think it's about, so I really think that is important, but doing it so naturally, right? Like you have to have this, yes, we plan and we write the lessons, but you have to be able to, in that moment, on the go, notice what's happening and react differently to all the things that are happening in your class, right? And I think that, takes time and takes talent and learning. But I think that's really, really important. And not only like often we talk about differentiated instruction, we're like, for different types of learners and this and that, but it's also for the different types of emotions that might come up, right? When you're talking about a topic in health ed, right? Like you're talking about addiction. There's many, many different emotions that are going to come up talking about that. So being able to kind of like shift your pedagogy in the moment, because each period you talk about that, it's going to be different. And so I think that talent is so important and beyond just like, beyond just like, okay, this is what we're doing for this type of learner and that type of learner, because, okay, you can list all the type of learners, but we don't often list the kind of emotions are going to come up in that moment and how we're going to react to them. And I think that's super important, especially in a health ed or sex ed class.
Wow, we had similar. I said flexibility. And I think that's almost like when you said that, it's the same thing. Like you got to know, or you got to be, and the way you framed it was perfect. Be paying attention to the class and the way things are going in the discussions. Like, hey, do we stay on this? Do we try and get through the rest of the lesson plan? Because that's what I planned. Like, you got to know your people. You got to know what's important. You got to have a plan or a vision. You got to be flexible. You got to be okay with not getting through it. Because I got this from you. I make a map at the beginning of every school year, what I'm going to do every day and like tie it to my units. It is so different by the end of the year.
Always.
Like some units go like an extra week or two. Like you gotta be okay with that. You can be like a type A or like organizational, but I don't know how that's gonna make you feel at the end.
But I think I love that you said like you learned the map from me, because one thing that I learned from you when we work together is to be more flexible. Because folks, I am the type A planner. But one thing I think as I progressed in my career and my maturity is that I've been able to be more flexible, and to be okay with like different periods being at different places.
Yes.
Because that's so, and we're talking about like secondary education right now, because what's happening in first period and fifth period is completely different. It's different kids, it's different times of the day. The conversations are going to be different. And I think making sure that each of those little cohorts, that you honor that is so important. And that's easier said than done, right? Because listen, teachers have a lot. You have 5 periods a day minimum usually. I know it's different at Bard, but in the traditional like public high school, it's super hard to do. It's not like you teach one class a day and it can be all like, it's not easy. But being able to do it some like innately, I think that comes along with after your career, you've had a lot of experience, you can do it a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up too. One class will operate well with like a discussion base. Others might need to write it down or like might need to do group pair stuff because they have a little more energy or it's a little harder for them to focus. Knowing your kids for sure. For sure.
Yeah, like that first period, everyone's asleep. The period after lunch, everyone's extra hype.
Yeah.
8th period, you're tired. So are they. Everyone wants to take a nap.
They're out the door. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do we, and being able to navigate that is so important. Because I guess one thing that frustrates me about education is that, all the theories and the research, it sounds so great, but it's often like, how to make a perfect classroom. Okay, cool. That'd be so easy if I only taught one period and one classroom, but I don't just have 16 young people in this perfect room. I have, or maybe I have 35 and I have 5 periods or, what have you. And I think it's often setting up teachers to not have the best success because they're like, they as in like, educational scholars and things will be like, oh, do all of these things, all these methods, easy. But it's so much more than that. It's so much harder than that. I don't think folks realize that you're teaching, I know it's different at Bard, but in the traditional, large high school, it's 35 kids, 5 different periods with 5 different sets of personalities, and you can't do the same thing each time. And it's really like 5 different lesson plans and how much time that takes.
And they have different courses, or what I call it, preps, as you call it. So you're doing different things. Also, the field of education and the research is not like super, it's still like a relatively new kind of field. Like all the stuff that comes out, like the stuff from the beginning of our careers to what we're doing now has changed dramatically. The DOE is implementing a new reading program next year. I'm not sure if you've like seen all of that.
Oh, I haven't. Exciting.
They're basically saying, oh, the way kids have been learning to read for so long is like missing a lot, and the research has been kind of flawed, and they're going to try something else. I was just like, all these generations of kids learning to read based on this like curriculum that apparently isn't like, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
It's always changing, and
yeah,
it's wild. Like I'm sure in 10 years it's going to be completely different too.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm really getting into like the field of implementation science, like with my own research and like,
say that again. So what is that?
Implementation science.
Ooh, tell me about
how
this.
we act. It's more like about like how teachers implement a curriculum, right? Because the lesson is there, the curriculum is there, but so much of our personalities and our identities come into it. I'm all geeked up about all of that stuff, and I think it is so important. Because I do think it matters. Like even you and I, right? We could be teaching the same curriculum, the same lesson, which we've done, and different young people are going to react differently just based on who we are as people. And some young people might enjoy your class more or my class more, or because that's just life. Like you don't get along with everyone. And I think that's a really interesting part of it. Education is not a one size all, especially in health ed, right? When we're like really talking about, challenging topics. It's an affective class, and it really, the teacher does matter.
100%. Yeah, that's a really good point. The way you implement a lesson, it's not enough to have the perfect lesson plan. Like how you're implementing that, what you're doing, how you're planning to address things is just as important.
Yeah. I think about like, like we all have our little jokes that we say, we have our little Well, I don't know. Not we all. I always have jokes because that's how I teach. I like to, I like to have fun. And I can't always say a little joke in second period that lands great, may or may not land great in seventh period.
It may
Like that's
distract
how,
them, yeah, for the rest of
yeah,
the period.
that's how I used to tell the smartest kids in the class, though, because sarcasm and understanding sarcasm takes a little bit of critical thinking, and I would always know the smartest kids because I would say something sarcastic, and there'd be like the one kid in the back that's like, not, you think's not paying attention, and then they're like, and they're like the only one that laughs. I'm like, aha, that's who they are.
I see you. We're gonna be friends.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, isn't it funny? Do you ever have students that you're like, wow, when you're if we were the same age, we would be friends?
I mean, I'm friends with a lot of kids that have graduated now. They're like in their mid-20s. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean, you meet kids and you're like, I really like you, like you're a fun person. And I think, okay, maybe
Yeah.
someday we could be friends or have some sort of relationship. Do you
Yeah.
feel that way too?
Yeah. When I was in the classroom, there was definitely young people. I'd be like, if they weren't 16, we would totally be friends. And I am, I've been teaching since 2000. So I definitely have students who are in their 30s now. I have one in particular. I mean, we're on Instagram, we've hung out, we've gone to bars and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've known her since she was 14. And that's really a special relationship for me because I didn't teach her, but I was her coach. And it's really cool to see like the person she's become. She's dope. She's so cool. Like she's doing amazing things. So yeah, it's cool to see how we enter into relationship with people we've taught when they're adults.
Yeah. Do you have any other traits that you want to mention for quality educators? Anything that stands out or things you wanted to highlight?
Well, I think you also have to know your content area. You have to have an expertise. You have to stay up on the newest research, the newest ways of teaching. I think that's so important, right? There's nothing worse than that teacher that's been teaching for 20 years and is still teaching the same lesson with the same resources. Like, let's get with the time. So I think professional development is so important.
Yeah.
As professionals, I don't think there's any way around that. And just add that to the list of many things teachers need to think about. But I do think that's important for teachers to stay up on the content and always mix it up. That's important for ourselves too, right? How bored would we be if we just teaching the same lesson for 20 years? We have to mix it up and get creative and stay up with the times. I mean, maybe the literature we teach, like I can imagine, like, I don't know how many ways there are to do algebra, right? So maybe it's different in our subject, but like in English class, if you're reading the same books every year, like that has to get like, how many times does one read like
Yeah.
Shakespeare?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Never again for me. But yeah, I love that. I think you got to be like you got to be seeking to continue to grow. And that comes from knowing who to learn from and where to learn from. That's why I love a lot of these health and PE conferences. You find people who are really great. Social media is also great as well. I've gotten so much from like educational Twitter, Instagram, obviously being sus about stuff like that. And I had something else. One piece that I was going to add to that, or what you said as well, was creativity. I think if you can reimagine lessons, the same lesson, but in a different way, bam, you're going to reach a lot more kids. And then another great quality of teachers is the reflection piece. And you and I did that really well when we taught together.
Yes.
How did this go? What do we want to change? What can we do better? Because we're not teaching the same thing every year. We fix it and make it better.
Yeah. And to your point about creativity, that is, in the public health world and the health education world, right? There's a lot of talks about EBIs, which for those of you not in this field, it's evidence-based interventions, right? Which is a curriculum that has been proven through evaluation and research to lead to a sustained behavior change. But because of the way that EBIs are created and they're written, and you have to have fidelity, which means you have to follow it a very specific way, it doesn't always allow for creativity. And which is why when I'm teaching, I'm always all about evidence informed, right? Because no curricula is going to be right for every single group, and you have to mix it up. And and there's like green lights for fidelity, and there's yellow and a full stop that's not fidelity anymore. And I know public health folks are going to come for me, but I have an MPH, so I understand public health. Everyone, don't come for me too hard. But I think that's an important conversation we need to have within health education, because we do have this what am I trying to say? I don't know. There's like a tension between public health folks and school health folks, and it has a lot to do with this fidelity and EBBIES and all of that stuff. But I struggle with how people in public health talk about the importance of EBBIES. Just as the person who's implemented them, I'm like,
yeah, you have a lot of experience.
Evidence informed, not evidence based.
I don't know.
Is more successful in my opinion.
That's a whole lesson in itself. I do not have a lot of background knowledge in public health. I don't think I've taken too many courses at all. You got the MPH. You've got all the degrees.
I have some of them. I'm taking a course right now from Yale, a free course.
Is it the emotional health one?
No, it's it's Global Digital Strategies for Behavioral Change. It's with their Global Institute of Public Health. But for a moment, I was like, oh, I should get a second PhD. And then I was like, calm down.
I'm an Ivy League graduate.
Right. Imagine, yeah, I don't want to be in the pale male Yale team, though.
Pale male Yale.
Shout out to Justine Angfonte, who coined that, right? Or that's the first time I heard it, is her saying it. The pale male in Yale. You know the type.
Yes.
With the khakis and the mansplaining.
Yes. Yale's got a type for sure.
Yeah. So I don't, but it's a cool course so far. So, but that's part of my professional development, right? Like, I want to learn more about using digital media in my work, hence what we're doing now. And so it's a really exciting course. What was one thing you would love to expand your knowledge on as a teacher?
Yeah, I was thinking of that realm, definitely like more public health stuff, but also I think I've had interest in like psychology and like social work and stuff like that, and having conversations with kids that are impactful, like emotionally, I guess. Like, we facilitate that discussion as a way to learn, but I'm thinking of it more like therapeutically. I think that's fascinating. I think people who can do that, or who have the skills to like therapize, I don't know if that's the word. I think that's
love it.
So cool. And so
I can imagine you doing that. You're
maybe
really good at that. That's something I learned from you.
I'm a good listener, I think.
You
Matt
are.
might argue differently, but I do my best.
Well, anyone who's friends with me is a great listener, because I never shut up.
I love you for it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so excited what we talked about today. I think there's so many things that make a great teacher. And I'm really excited for us to have some students on someday to talk about. I would love to hear what they say and how it aligns with what we think about being good teachers, what you need to have. Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
Grateful that it's one of the last weeks of school. Grateful for another dope episode with you, and looking forward to next week.
Yeah, so looking forward to next week. All right, everyone. Take care. We'll see you at episode 5.
Bye, everybody.